My teachers are in the crowd, and they are shocked that someone would give me a microphone. And my mom is also here tonight, and she'll be taking pictures of me to post in the family group chat. I am a Wisconsin dairy farmer from the Driftless region. Every morning, I wake up and I make the commute to my family's dairy farm on the ridgetop south of town. I take care of my family's animals every single day. I occasionally help in the fields. And in the summertime, when the weather is nice, I let my cows out to pasture. In my opinion, my family's dairy farm is the most beautiful place in the world. In the summertime, it's rolling green hills dotted with black and white cows, surrounded by the trees that make up the forests of western Wisconsin. I love my family's dairy farm. I love what it stands for, and I will do everything in my power to protect it, the animals who live there, and the land that my family has stewarded for generations. As many of you know, Wisconsin is the dairy state. However, in the last 20 years, we have seen a steep decline in the number of farms here in Wisconsin. We have half the number of farms we had in the early 2000s. Being a dairy farmer means constantly advocating for yourself. We rely on consumers to buy our milk in the grocery stores. And we rely on our government to help us when we have problems. Most dairy farmers are self-employed. We do not have an employer to provide insurance or health care to us when things get tough. And we trust them to help protect us, the land we live on, and listen when we need help. I lost my train of thought. Thank you. It's easy to feel small when you're so far away out in rural America, especially right now. It's easy to feel like nobody's listening, like wondering, if I say something, will anyone in power come to help me? Like if I yell, will anyone hear me? But why should I have to yell to be heard? Why should I have to scream out? Why do I feel powerless? Don't I deserve to wake up in the morning and live a life worth living? Don't I deserve to wake up and not have to wonder what today's headline is? How did we get here? For many of us in this room, it's not from a lack of trying. But after all these years and all this effort and all this work, where are we? And why should the people in power listen to us? Power exists wherever we believe it does. And as long as we believe that people in power who don't listen to us are more powerful than us, they will remain in unchecked authority. So why should they listen to us? Is because we matter. All of us matter. La Crosse, Wisconsin matters. Middle America and the people from all over who call it home matter. Many of us are in the room here are from Wisconsin. We're a swing state. We have the power to change the outcome of elections. And like it or not, we are also home to the Green Bay Packers. The Green Bay Packers are the only NFL team that is owned by their fans. We in Wisconsin are proof that when you believe in something and you support it, you can enact great change on the world. We are the working class of America. How dare they doubt us? We are nurses, we are doctors, we are lawyers, we are teachers, We are engineers and fabricators. We are also dairy farmers, and we are the people who go out and we work the 9 to 5s and we work the late shifts, and then we come home to our family, and then we go out into our community because we believe the world can be a better place, and we believe that despite everything, the world is still beautiful. We are the people who rise to the challenge. We are the people who, when we come together and we unite as one, we are the loudest and the most powerful thing in the United States. Thank you. I would next like to welcome La Crosse Mayor Shondell Washington Spivey to the stage. Thank you all very much.
Advocate and trailblazer to the great city of La Crosse. It is truly an honor to acknowledge the many years of service from the man everyone affectionately calls Mayor Pete. Can we get a Mayor Pete? Hold that, because we're coming back to that a little bit later, just so you know. Whether it was his advocacy for revitalizing his city and smarter streets in South Bend, Indiana, or his work to launch 70,000 infrastructure projects to improve transportation, safety, and technology as Secretary of Transportation, or his service in the Naval Reserves, Mayor Pete has done a lot in his time in public service. He is someone who truly understands the importance in being involved in local government. And as a newly elected mayor, we share an identity that many will not understand, but we have both experienced how federal and state policy gets implemented. The local level is where the rubber meets the road. And listen, La Crosse, I'm with you. I'm frustrated. There's moments of high emotion. I'm empathetic to everything that is happening. And every morning that I wake up and say, what the hell is next? And it's tiring. But I'm serving alongside you all as your mayor. I'm with you. I believe that together, with love, and of course with action, we can make wonderful things happen in our community. So believe me on that, and let's do this together. And we have this amazing opportunity. And from mayor to now to Secretary of Transportation, I want to bring in someone who knows that local leadership is a launching pad for national impact. So join me, and this is where this Mayor Pete comes in, y'all. All right? And join me in bringing out Mayor Pete. Where is he at? We're going to chant his name. Mayor Pete, Mayor Pete, Mayor Pete.
Wow, thank you so much. It feels so good to be here. What an amazing turnout, what amazing energy. Thank you, Mayor. You got the city looking good and a lot to be proud of here. Thank you to everybody who is part of our program, and above all, thanks to you for coming out to spend some time together. I know that there are a lot of things you could be doing on a Friday evening. You did not have to go out one more time into the cold in order to come here and share this evening with me. But I couldn't be happier to be here. By way of reintroduction, I'm Pete Buttigieg. Everybody seems to call me Mayor Pete. I don't know, I guess that's a little easier. I'm a creature of the Midwest through and through. Grew up in South Bend, Indiana. There we go. By the way, isn't it weird to have Indiana be really good at football right now? I like it. I'm just still getting used to it. I grew up in South Bend after so many of the auto factories had left. I didn't know until I left that it was unusual to have acres of collapsing factories on either side of the road when you made your way to school. And I took on board that message that so many of us in communities around our part of the country had taken on, that to make something of yourself, to succeed, meant getting out. And I did. And it was the moment that I got to the East Coast that I realized that I was from somewhere, and that here in the Midwest was where I belonged. I came home, and to make a very long story short, had the honor of serving as mayor for 2 terms and saw our city go from being described as one of America's dying communities to the fastest, strongest growth economically and in population that we had seen in decades. Something that's happening in so many communities around the Midwest that are choosing to turn and face their future in a different way. Emphasis on future. We didn't go around saying we were going to make things look just like they did before. We didn't go around saying we were going to make South Bend, Indiana great again. We just did the work because we knew there's no such thing as again in the real world, that we had to help each other find a better future. Then I ran for president. It went pretty well. I didn't become president, so it didn't go that well. But afterwards, had the opportunity to serve as Secretary of Transportation and worked with Democrats and Republicans alike to deliver improvements in roadways, in airports, to finally, by the time we left, see the number of air traffic controllers in this country go up and the number of road crash fatalities in this country go down. And I'm proud of what we have to show for that work. And another very important thing happened in those years, which is that my husband Chasten and I got a phone call while I was serving as secretary that changed everything, because the next day we were holding our twins, our infants, Gus and Penelope, in our arms. It changed our lives. See, I married a teacher, a blue gold, by the way, who was very proud of the time that he spent in Eau Claire. I'm a member of that sandwich generation, looking after small children and trying to do right by a parent who's growing older at the same time, which is why I missed our previous date in November. And I want to both report to you that Mom is doing much better, and thanks so many of you for reaching out with well wishes when we had to reschedule. So that's enough about me. I'm here to talk with you and about what's going on with you, and to find out what brought you out here tonight. Why are you here? Oh, thanks. But it's definitely not about me. I want to listen to what brought you out here. Maybe you are looking at what's going on across the state line, wondering how in the hell in a country built on freedom we have masked federal agents in tactical gear as if it was Fallujah on a Midwestern city's streets. Maybe you're wondering how it could be that an administration talks about doing right by workers and cost of living and made all these big promises about bringing prices down on day one, and a year later all we have to show for it is declining manufacturing and increasing prices. Or maybe you are conservative. You voted for this president. You voted for your current congressman. You're not too sure about a guy like me coming into town, but you're willing to have a conversation. And if that is true, I want to welcome you and thank you for coming. So let me say, I did not come here to say things are better than they look. In fact, the one thing it seems all of us can agree on right now is that things are not going well in the United States of America. Socially, economically, politically. Socially, we're at each other's throats. People are getting their information from algorithms that basically do one of two things every time you scroll through your feed. It's either, here's this person I already like, looking good, or here's this person I already don't like, doing something that reminds me why I don't like them. Economically, we are in such a different place from what the American promise represents. If you were born at the end of World War II, the year my mother was born, you had a 90% chance of finishing better economically than your parents. By the time I was born in the early 80s, 50-50. It's a coin flip. And it's gotten worse since then. The average age of someone buying a home for the first time is now 40. And a lot of folks wonder if they're ever going to be able to buy a home at all. Help is on the way. And then there's the matter of our politics, our government, which is so profoundly broken and has been for a long time. A Supreme Court that is completely unaccountable. Congressional districts drawn where in most of them you know who is going to win before the first vote is even cast. Not this one, though. Just want to make that real clear. And leaders from the White House to Congress who don't seem to think that they are accountable to anyone, which is part of what drew me to come over to this district in particular, I must say. I mentioned that I worked with a lot of Republicans and Democrats to deliver results. A lot of them would cross the aisle to work with us, even if we didn't agree on everything. Your congressman, a little bit different. We had some really interesting interactions. But what I'm really concerned about isn't the way he treated me, it's the way he's treating you. Because if you live in this district, your congressman doesn't believe that you deserve him coming to look you in the eye and explain why he's making the choices that he's making at a town hall like this. It seems to me that if Congressman Van Orden truly believes that voting to cut the taxes of the richest people in this country was a good idea, he would be willing to come to a room like this one and explain why he believes that. It seems to me that if Congressman Van Orden thinks that it is appropriate to slash Medicaid, to cut Badger Care at a time like this when so many people are hurting, he would be willing to stand here and say why. It seems to me in a state with 310,000 people who get their health insurance through the exchange, through the Affordable Care Act, if he's going to continue to say he believes that it should be obliterated entirely, he might be willing to come to a room like this and tell those people how they're supposed to get health insurance. But if he's not willing to come here and do a town hall, we can have a perfectly good one without him. My most fundamental message to you is it doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't have to be this way. And we shouldn't let it. This isn't about who went viral on the internet or who's got the favor of Mar-a-Lago at the moment. This isn't about Greenland or Venezuela. This is about everyday life in Western Wisconsin and in the United States of America. Because if we get our politics right, if we make them better, everyday life gets better. From the first moment you wake up, I don't know what it's like when you wake up. My wake up is usually a couple hours before sunup with a 4-year-old tap me on the shoulder saying, "Papa, where's my fire truck?" Or something along those lines. But from the first moment you get up and you go down to the fridge, you could open the fridge and notice that the OJ is running low and you need more eggs and not wince when you think about what the receipt's going to show the next time you go to the grocery store. If we had leaders willing to actually work to make life more affordable in this country instead of slashing taxes for the richest people we have. And then when you get in your car and head to work, you should be driving on good roads so you don't have to worry that a pothole is going to take you to an unaffordable repair. And if you got kids, you ought to be able to drop them off knowing that you live in a place where your leaders have delivered quality, affordable public education. Or if they're not old enough for school, that you have access to childcare and daycare that is affordable so that you can get on with your life when you need to work. Or if you are expecting, you should be able to count, as people living in every other country in this world can do, on paid time off and the parental leave that you need to accommodate a new arrival in something as beautiful as having a child come into your life. And if you are not planning to become a parent at this particular moment, you should be secure in the knowledge that your leaders respect that that is your choice and not theirs. This is about everyday life. I haven't even gotten you through your commute to work yet, but when you do get there, you ought to be able to get to a job where you are paid well and have good benefits and secure in the knowledge that one job is enough to do well in this country. Possibly because you have the option to join a union in your workplace that will fight for you. And then when you come home from work and go to your home, it ought to be safe. And it ought to be affordable. And you ought to have that hope of owning a home. And if you do, when you sit down to do the bills, you shouldn't feel like you've got to choose between your health insurance premium and your mortgage. And when you do those bills, you should still be able to picture how you're going to have a vacation. That's not too much to ask in the United States of America. And then when you're finally done with your day and sitting down on the couch and thinking about what's next, maybe you're looking at the news. If you are involved in politics and decide that you want to participate and speak out, whether it's online or in person, like the 1,500 people from this community alone who showed up in person for that No Kings rally, that much. You shouldn't have to. You should be able to without even hearing the name of the President of the United States. Whoever that president may be. Wouldn't that be nice? It is not too much to ask. And I believe that better life begins with people in places like this. Decent, reasonable, practical people saying that we can do things differently, insisting that we can do things differently because we know that what politics is really about is what it's like to live in America. And just one other thing. This is what it means to live in America, what it means to be an American. On the way over here, I passed by a facility where I used to train as a Navy reservist, getting skills that I would take with me when I went to serve in Afghanistan. And I did not put my life on the line for this country just because it's a place where I live. So many people put their lives, in fact, let's take a moment. If you serve this country in uniform, could you just take a moment to stand up and be recognized? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It's not just a place where we live. It is our country, and it stands for something. It means something about freedom, about democracy. A country that was built around the idea that we will never hand one man so much power that he can dominate all the rest of us. The power really is yours. We just need to be ready to use it. So, that is the longest you will hear me speak this evening in a row. I want to have a conversation with you, hear about what's on your mind, learn a thing or two. Let's get going. Microphones will come to you, so just raise your hand, and I will call on you, and I'll try to get to every corner of the room as best I can. Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry. I'm very nervous. Thank you for coming. So I am a mother of an 18-year-old son who hears about politics frequently. What I am hearing from him is that the Democratic Party is not doing enough. We have been kind, we have been reasonable, and it is getting us nowhere. And when we do win the midterms, it's not going to be because we are necessarily doing great things. It's because Donald Trump is failing us miserably. So what is your response to 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds who are feeling that way? Thank you.
Thank you. I think any young person who feels that way has a point. Look, if all we have to say is we're not him, and he's terrible, even though he's pretty terrible, that's not the same as a governing agenda. And I think a lot of people don't see how their everyday life, from their commute, their breakfast, their job, whatever it is necessarily different if all we have to say is all of the many, many, many serious problems that this president and this Congress have created. We have to explain what we're trying to build, not just what we're trying to block. And I do fear that some in my party are maybe lapsing into the temptation to just be about turning things back to the way they were. But I would argue that if things were going along fine in our economy, our society, and our politics, we wouldn't be in this situation in the first place. So this is not about like somehow taking power, finding all the little pieces of what got smashed up by these people, taping them back together and saying, here you go, you can have life just like it was in 2022. I don't think it's just not the right answer, let alone the politics of it aren't going to be very convincing. But there is a different way. We can talk about how to meet the challenges of this moment in ways that make you concretely better off. And that is a big part of what I think we need to be doing right now. So thanks for raising that. Keep working on them. Yes, ma'am.
I know an awful lot of people on the other side of the aisle that we can't get through to, that they just don't know how close to the abyss we really are. As a veteran and supporting the Constitution, I'm despairing because I don't know how to talk to them. They're just going on like, la-da-da-da-da, everything's great. How do we get the message out to them beyond all the algorithms so they consider voting for people that are looking to the future?
This is where I believe in the power of the offline. And as the mayor spoke to, the power of the local, because we are increasingly sorted into these silos where not just our opinions, but our facts are, or would be facts, are presented to us according to what people think we already believe. But our relationships, our families, our neighborhoods, our communities, our churches, our little league, our sports loyalties, right? There might be a lot of people, you don't have much in common with them except the Packers, maybe, right? That is where we have a chance to get through to people. And it's not like you explain it just so and suddenly they see the light, right? And we got to go in listening too. It's not like we were right about everything these last few years. And we have to be willing to have that conversation. That's how I developed my unexpected specialty of going on Fox News a lot. And kind of the digital equivalent of that, which is that I go to a lot of places that are a little more right-leaning, Trumpy, but the most powerful thing is hearing from people you already know. And if they don't suddenly flip, it's not about that. It's about making sure, first of all, that they understand that those who disagree are coming from a sincere place. And then slowly, over time, having that conversation that we need to have. And when we are in rooms like this, talking to each other as human beings, sharing our own personal experiences and what these things mean to us, why our lives are different because of this or that decision that came out of a big white building in Washington, D.C., that's, I think, when our politics starts to change. And I believe in that kind of practice. It is harder. Honestly, it's harder to talk to somebody you know and like and disagree with than it is to talk to some jerk on Twitter, right? But that's what actually matters. Especially because the jerk on Twitter might just be a robot in Russia. We don't even know, right? Thank you. Next question. Be sure, if you don't mind, share your name and where you're from, too, if you like, when I call on you. Straight ahead of me, sir. Right here.
Okay. Hi, I'm Mike Heidenreich. I'm from Lodi, Wisconsin. Actually quite a bit east of here. And I'm a 17-year IBEW member, and I'm actually running for Congress out there. So if you want to come out by, we'd love to have you.
Thank you for stepping up.
But the reason I've got lots of answers for lots of our problems, but one that comes up almost every town hall I hold is we look around the room here, you see a lot of white hair. And it's because right now, a lot of us remember what it was like when our country was functioning. One of the things that it's hard to get through to someone who's never seen it function, who's grown up thinking Trump is normal, thinking that that's how our government's supposed to work, that we're supposed to get decrees by Twitter. It's one of the things that I've had a hard time talking to people and saying, how do you tell someone who's never seen normal that not only is this not normal, but there's a lot better ways of doing this?
Yeah. Well, I think those of us who've lived that way and feel that way have trouble accepting the fact that we have to explain it or that we have to make that case. But we just do. I mean, it's not enough to say, oh, that's authoritarian. We got to explain why authoritarianism is worse. And maybe we feel like we shouldn't have to, but we do. And look, passing out of living memory is the experience of the generations who saw what happened when this sort of thing spread in a lot of places of the world and did a lot of damage. So we like to think these questions are asked and answered, but it doesn't work that way. That's why I keep coming back to that touchstone of everyday life. The reason why our country, which has always had its ups and downs and always had its moments where it comes short of its ideal, but the reason why it was such a shining beacon to the rest of the world, the reason why in the Cold War you had a lot of Soviet citizens who wished they were here and not a lot of the other way around, wasn't the theoretical elegance of the ideas of the Founding Fathers. It was the fact that your everyday life was actually better if you were in a country where you had that kind of freedom. And I think we need to connect those dots and not just assume that it's accepted. But the other thing we got to do is move our imaginations beyond the presidency we're living in. And I know why it's hard. It's hard by design. But just repeat after me inside your minds. Repeat after me. This president will not be politically active in the United States forever. Think about that. That is obviously a matter of fact, and it is kind of a hard thing to believe, right? So then what? If all we have to say is about him, then we're not going to be talking about you. And I think it's talking about you that helps us cut through that for folks who maybe don't see the way we do how horrifying some of the stuff going on right now really is. Listen. Mike's on his way to you.
I'm Viva. I'm from Winona, Minnesota. I just moved to St. Paul about 6 months ago. I'm 23 years old. I graduated from college 3 years ago, and I have a pretty decent resume. I haven't been able to find a full-time job for 6 months now. If I hadn't over-prepared, I wouldn't be able to afford my health care right now, the cost of groceries. How am I supposed to get through the next 2 years knowing that things aren't going to keep moving in a good direction? And how am I supposed to continue to give positively to society knowing it feels like it's not really working for me and people like me right now?
What'd you study? Music. Huh? So, look, this is a real challenge that the whole generation is facing. I love, by the way, that you framed the question in terms of how can I keep contributing, even now, even with the pressure that you're feeling. Part of what our society, community, government is supposed to do is make that a little easier while you are finding your feet. Create an environment where there are opportunities for young people who have finished their education to be able to contribute and earn and live and thrive. And when we have this environment we have now where jobs are giving way to gigs, where a lot of things that used to be careers are actually shifting before our eyes, and that will increase a lot with AI, right? We need to be looking to answers that will speak to that too. I'm really worried about what AI will do to job opportunities, especially for people in their 20s like you. If we get it right, if we hold these companies to account and make sure that the American public is to participate in the stupendous wealth that is being created, then it could very much lead to a shorter work week and more money in your pocket. But if we don't get it right, it'll just mean that much more concentration of wealth and power in a tiny number of hands and very, very little for everybody else. And that's not a technology question, it's a policy question. It's a question whether the people we send to Washington are thinking about you and rooting for you to make it and setting up policies accordingly. Including, by the way, things like policy your congressman seems to disagree with, which is making sure that you can stay on a family health care plan up until the age of 26, which is part of the Affordable Care Act that they want to delete, right? And other things that are creating an opportunity for you to contribute the way you want to contribute and thrive as a person as well. Thanks for the question. All the way in the back. Sorry, I'm making it hard for you with the mic, but.
Hi, I'm Liz. I come from across the border, Minnesota. I am from southern Minnesota, actually. My question is, with what's going on in Minneapolis right now, I work very close. I work very close to everything that's going on. I'm sorry, I'm trying not to cry. How do we deal with this attack on our community and our people that we love? How do we go to work feeling safe and come home to, you know what I'm trying to ask. What do we do? How can we feel important and try to change what's going on to our city?
Well, thank you for being committed to making things better. That's the first thing. That's actually the most important thing. The only antidote to a politics of fear is a politics of courage. And it starts with showing up. Because otherwise an environment can emerge where it seems like they want you to think that you're alone, caring about this. Even though the majority of Americans think what's going on there is wrong. Of course we got to have law, and we got to have borders. Countries have to have borders. We have to have reasonable immigration. Of course we do. But this, masked federal agents behaving like this. When I was in college, these were the product of the fever dreams of my most conservative and libertarian friends when we were arguing over beers. And they said, here's why the Clean Water Act is tyranny. Because it will someday lead to federal agents roughing people up or worse on American streets. And I said, no, that'll never happen. In some ways, the joke is on both of us. Didn't happen because we were enforcing regulations around the environment. But sure enough, it happened right under our noses. And here again, I think our touchstone has to be the humanity that we share and the everyday lives that we are leading. It's not about just some academic concern about the nature of liberty. It's that who wants to live in a country where you got folks like that roaming your streets? It's not making anyone safer. No one asked for this. This is not helping anyone. The other thing I would urge you to do, though, because I see in you the sincerity and the commitment that you bring to this, is to engage folks who might not very obviously seem like they would agree with you. I mean, I was just talking to some folks from the farming community here, representing a community that codes pretty conservative, who are dealing with the ramifications of what this extreme immigration policy will mean to anyone's ability to run a farm in this country, right? We can bring together strange bedfellows, and if they're doing everything they can to pull us apart, let's do everything we can to bring people together, because there really is a strong majority of people who believe this.
My name is Kendra. I'm going to build on that.
Yeah.
So my husband and I are here from a little rural village, about 30 families. There are no rapists or murderers in our families, but ICE is there. For the last 7 days, we are exhausted because we got a call on Friday night that a babysitter in the local mobile home park had a 2-month-old baby that hadn't been picked up for 3 days. The next night, in the middle of the night, we got a call that the tomato farm an hour that way, ICE had trapped people on top of the roof for 7 hours. Do you all remember how cold it was a couple nights ago? 7 hours, but we were already, like our little group that was mobilized in this little town, we were already dealing with things and we didn't have anybody else. Can you help convince everybody that we have to organize locally very, very fast?
First of all, thank you for bringing attention to what is happening in your community. Thank you for making it clear that this is real people and real lives. And I just don't know how anybody can hear of a child, any child, being treated like that, being subjected to that as a result of policy, and be okay with that. Left, right, or center. I don't know how you can have ever heard the slightest bit of scripture and not wonder about the judgment that comes for anyone who is a part of treating people like that. I wish I could encourage you to call your congressman. Do that anyway, by the way. It's still important. But also, it's so important to speak up because people don't realize that they're not alone, especially in smaller communities, right? And there are people you have to speak up for who are unable or afraid to speak up for themselves, right? I have to believe, I've always believed that any political controversy or contest or battle is not between people who are good or people who are bad, but that each of us is capable of good and bad things. And so much depends on having what is best in us and not what is worst in us summoned. And if our leaders are not prepared to summon what is best in us, then we have to do it for each other. And we can do it here, and we can do it in real life, we can do it online, we can do it offline, but especially offline, because nobody who looks in your eye and hears that story can walk away and not be moved. Yeah.
Oh, careful. Hi, I'm right here. I'm going to hold your microphone, okay?
Hello, my name is Linus. I am 9 years old, and I have this one simple question. How can children like me make this world a better place?
Wow. Well, thanks for the question, Linus. Yeah, I think you just made this room a better place. Oh, thank you. Oh, thanks very much. Yeah, here, let me. That's very kind. Very much. That's so Midwestern. Thank you. All right, I'm not leaving empty-handed. I'm going to come out here more often. I like this place. Look, one thing I think is really important to appreciate is that you don't have to be in a position of authority. You don't have to be in political office. You don't even have to be old enough to vote to make a difference in your community. I get the impression you've already figured that out. I hope you'll remember that as a young person, you have a kind of moral authority. And what I mean by that is, hopefully, regardless of politics, when you're talking to someone who, you're going to see the 22nd century, right? So when you approach somebody in a position of responsibility and ask them what they're doing to make the world a better place, you're doing it from the perspective of somebody who, that's not a theory, that's not like something to just dream about, that's something you're going to live. And I got to tell you, even a pretty, grizzled political veteran will be moved by you asking people what they can do to make things better, especially if you're willing to do your part too. And someday that might mean voting and running, I hope, for office and whatever else you can do. But long before that, you already have the power to call out what is best in people's hearts. Use it. And thanks for coming. Sir.
And repeat the question. Hi, I got it for you, okay?
Okay. Thank you for recognizing the veterans. That was a very wonderful thing, all of you. Thank you so much. Which raises one of the things that really is on everybody's mind. We're abusing the military, we're abusing our veterans, we're abusing our National Guard. And it's really a tough thing because I was in the National Guard during the Vietnam era. And I know how it feels to be on the line, so to speak, when you're called up. I was in Milwaukee for the riots. I was in Madison for the riots twice. I know what it's like to be called up and you have to look across the aisle and see people that you know, friends, and they're on the other side. But it was a different time. It was a different kind of a riot, different kind of a situation. Now the abuse is absolutely incredible. And I'm really worried that a lot of our people are going to look at our veterans, look at our National Guard, and kind of have that same creeping feeling that we used to have when we came back before. We're not going to get the respect of what we really are. That abuse is something terrible. And our country has got to be able to stand up. And by the way, the Constitution is it. This right here is your contract with America. It gives you your rights to be here as a citizen. Please all read your Constitution. I know that is exactly where you're coming from, and our political future is going to depend on being able to defend this. Thank you so much.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for reminding us of your experience. And I know that was an experience for really a generation of service members. And thank you for your service. And look, I say that knowing that I was fortunate to belong to a generation of veterans who came home to pretty good welcome. Our country learned the hard way how to separate its attitudes about a policy from its attitudes about the people who were sent somewhere by that policy. And we didn't do that right when you were serving. But we learned. We grew. That's the best thing about this country. These battles now over even what can be shown in a history museum or what can be talked about at a university. These battles over the past, and some of what they say is, you can't talk about any of the things that were wrong about America, because that must mean you hate America. To me, anytime we talk about something that went wrong, it's because some of the finest moments that brought out the greatest character of this country is how we put it right. And so let's not lose one of those things I think we quietly put right as a country, which was figuring out that it is not the responsibility of so many of these people who just want to serve their country, who have been put by Washington politicians, led by the President of the United States, in these situations. And let us remember that if this is going to change, as it must, those who we have to hold accountable are the people who are issuing these orders. And we get to do that. That's in that Constitution you brought too. And that's a big part of our system. So thank you. Sir.
Hi, my name is Rodney Rave. I'm a current candidate for Congress here in the 3rd Congressional District and hoping to unseat Derek Van Orden. I'm a retired union operating engineer. My question for you, in your opinion, what is it going to take for Congress and Senate to finally do what they need to do about removing this administration?
Well, I don't know if they'll get there, but let me share one thing I've noticed that I think is pretty interesting. The president's grip on his own party is starting to slip. You know, he pretty much commanded them not to vote to release those Epstein files. And a decent number of them said, no, we're going to do that. Yeah, we're going to need to do that. Well, yeah, to be clear, it's not that they're complying, but it tells you something. In Indiana, where I grew up, we held a rally against the gerrymandering, the redistricting that he was forcing them to do. And that is a conservative state with a Republican supermajority. But we filled that state house to the rafters. Hundreds of people saying, don't do this. And even so, I thought they were probably going to do it, because it's a very strong Republican majority in the House and in the Senate. And the president called them personally. The vice president was sent to personally travel there to put pressure on them to do what they wanted, what the White House wanted these legislators to do, these Republican legislators. And they took a vote, and they said no, and it wasn't even close. So does this mean everybody's seen the light? I don't know. But it does mean that a lot of people in the Republican Party are beginning to do the thing that I'm wishing more people in my party would do, which is seriously visualize post-Trump politics and prepare accordingly. To take on board that fact that he will not be around forever and start organizing for what happens next. And I think the sooner we're in touch with that, ironically, the sooner that day will actually wind up coming. See your name in the way back there.
I am Alexander. I am from La Crosse. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much for being a man of integrity and compassion. What I have to share tonight is a big idea, and it only takes 2 minutes. I timed it out. And all I ask is that people just listen for 2 minutes with an open mind.
Could you ask a question?
Sure. Our company, Voter Directed Network, is working to end political corruption and end political violence with the online political evolution. We know that the only path away from authoritarian dynamics humanity has ever had involved inventing, enhancing, or improving democracy or existing democratic republics. We believe that the solution to the party-driven techno-authoritarianism we face today is techno-democratic republics. Sure. My question is, will you run as an independent
I'm not going to make that kind of news or any kind of news of that level here with you tonight. I'm a good ways away from any life decisions. But I appreciate what you're saying about how the problem is not just that this party won or that party won. We got some serious systematic structural problems in our democracy. Of which probably the biggest, in my view, has to do with the role of money in politics. And everybody says, well, you can't do anything about that because the Constitution and the Supreme Court. But here's the thing. If it's really the case that the current text of the Constitution leaves us no choice but to accept this corruption of our politics by that much money, then it's time to change the Constitution. That's what an amendment is, right? I'm not saying I think that'll happen overnight, but in a country that amended its Constitution so that you could not purchase a beer, and then realized that was a bad idea and amended it back, surely on something this important, we could have a constitutional amendment clarifying that a corporation is not the same thing as a person and money is not the same thing as speech. I also don't want to pretend I didn't hear the word independent. I belong to a political party, but frankly, I'm getting pretty skeptical of what our two-party system has delivered for this country, too. I belong to my political party for a reason, but I will say I would love for us to have structural reforms that make it easier for people representing a range of views to get elected, because then it is harder for a minority movement, and make no mistake, MAGA is a minority movement, to take over an entire country by taking over one of the two political parties. Thanks. Sir. Oh, yeah, we'll do both of you. Go ahead, sir, and then I'll come back to the gentleman in the hat. Go ahead, sir.
Sir, first of all, I'd like to thank you for your service.
Thank you. Likewise.
My area of concern is typically white Christian nationalism and its influence that has occurred and as a group has been dog whistled into much of its difficult for the rest of us to handle. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure what we can do to calm those waters.
Yeah.
Because it's not the same definition of what many of us were taught.
I think it begins by insisting that God does not belong to a political party in the United States of America. And I think we can do two things at once. We can honor the fact that this is a nation where we respect people of any faith or of no faith, and that none of us ought to have to live by somebody else's interpretation of his own religion. And at the same time, I think it's fair game for those of us who are rooted in a religious tradition to share what we believe it teaches. I belong to a Christian tradition that holds that salvation has to do with how you can protect the vulnerable from the violence of the powerful. I read scriptures that talk about how he who oppresses the poor taunts his maker. I think about, I was hungry and you did not feed me. I think about how most of the time the richest and the most powerful people who appear in the stories that are handed down to us in Scripture are rarely the good guys, except when they have some flash of insight that forces them to look at the world in a different way, often having their heart opened by some terrible shock. Maybe this is the shock that a lot of us needed, though, because it's shocking. I just cannot imagine that God looks at the way people are being treated in this country by other people, and that corresponds to any of what he has asked us to do. But again, that's me talking about my understanding of my faith. The point is for us to talk about it with open hearts with each other and not let anybody take a monopoly on what Christianity or any other faith means in practice.
Thanks, Pete, for being here. Just to comment on his concerns, being gay when churches started closing their doors in the 80s and the 90s, I was left finding my own way home. And there are other concepts of God, and what was explained to me was before us, when all there was God. God could only imagine what true love was. God could not experience it. So God took a piece of self and placed over here or there. That smaller part of self is us. And we still knew the whole of God as all love. So for God to know what true love is, God had to create love's opposite, which is fear. All our decisions in life are made from either love or fear. And fear is either made up in our mind or an institution instills it upon us. So really, love is all there is. There are other concepts that of God is what I'm trying to make. And we are not created out of the earth like the Bible says. I believe that we all are an extension of God, of love. So God can experience love through us. But my question, Pete, is on health care.
Bring us right back down to policy. We went from theology to policy in a moment's notice.
I'm very happy to see these billboard signs, Love Plus Medicine, being taken down. The staff and doctors and nurses and everybody are wonderful. Don't get me wrong there. But the love stops at the finance department doors. And I have to see several specialists. And my bills fall outside the payment plan guidelines, which gives the hospitals permission to take money out of my household budget to meet their needs. Is there a safety net that you can provide or work on? I know others have in the past tried to provide a safety net for people who go past their guidelines, either in extending the payment guideline in months to pay back the service, but they're ruining people's lives by dipping into their household budget. Can you do anything about that?
We have to. And if we are to truly live in a great country doesn't let people face financial ruin because of a health problem. So what does it take? Well, one thing is, and without knowing the specific case, one thing is there's a long way to go in the insurance side of things, including making sure that any American who wants it can have a Medicare-style public insurance that they have access to. especially if that's better than the private and the corporate plans, which I believe it would be. But it also means that that's not enough, right? We have to respond to the costs that people actually face. And policy can make a difference, like the policies around surprise medical billing, right? That shows that we can act a little more directly on that. The other thing I think is really important is transparency. I don't know if you've tried this, again, not knowing your case, but one bit of advice I got from a family member as we were navigating something a bit like this is calling and asking them to specifically itemize every single charge sometimes gets you kind of a miraculous reduction. Largely, I think, because they don't want to tell you how much they're charging you for a Tylenol or hospital socks or some of that other stuff. So again, I don't know, all the ins and outs of how it is around here. But I do know that you shouldn't be having to resort to tips and tricks in order to make ends meet with healthcare that you need. And that is not the way it is because of some cosmic law. That is the way it is because of U.S. policy. And different policy would make a difference. And if current leadership doesn't see that, great opportunity to invite new leadership to come along.
Okay, this question, my name is Audrey. I'm living on Alaska, and I've been a member of the 3rd District forever, since the day I was born right here in La Crosse. This question is for you, but it's also for Brad Pfaff, our state senator. Just in the last few days, Brad was one of 4 representatives from this area that sent a letter to Derek Van Orden about health care funding in Wisconsin and what he promised and what he did not deliver on. I just saw a copy of that letter thanks to our state representative from this area, Steve Doyle, who sent that to me. And the non-answer that was given was irritating, upsetting, angering to me. I don't know how Brad felt about it, but I can imagine he's got some choice words for Mr. Van Orden's staff about how that letter was given a stock response that never answered the initial question. But my question to both of you and to anybody that's running for office, Rebecca, the other gentleman that spoke, we've got at least a year before he's gone, no matter what the election does. How the heck do we get his attention and deal with him for the next 369 days?
Senator, thanks for being here, by the way.
Mayor, thank you, Audrey. It is regards to the big, beautiful bill that Congress passed, jammed through the House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate this summer. And we are worried about rural health care. And it's the impact that that big, beautiful bill will have upon rural health care here in western Wisconsin. So again, thank you for being here today. Thank you, Audrey.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's clear that these cuts, these savage cuts, are going to mean rural hospitals closing. They're going to put rural facilities that are already under so much pressure under even more. You know, as residents in this area, on things like maternity, just to take one example, certainly mental health, just how the local infrastructure has been diminished in so many places. And I would think that if he stands by his vote, he would be willing to, come tell you in person. But, we are where we are. But I appreciate your other point, too. This isn't just an election day concern. I'm interested in building up the kind of power that can change if not the hearts, then at least the behaviors of the people who are now in charge. That's kind of what I was getting at telling you the story from Indiana and some of the other things that some of the miracles we've seen, actually, in members of Congress being willing to do something different. Make no mistake, Derek Van Orden is deeply committed to abolishing the Affordable Care Act. Having said that, he did this interesting flip-flop on the question of the subsidies. I'm pretty sure you all helped make that happen. I wouldn't trust that he's exactly had a change of heart. He himself called it a temporary off-ramp, but my point is, it was probably a temporary off-ramp to the political problem he was experiencing when people here rose up and said, don't do that. So keep the pressure on. Right. Oh, yeah. But pressure works. Doesn't work as well as having good leadership, but it's the next best thing. Sir.
It seems to me that the Republicans have a brilliant communication strategy of hammering home their fear-mongering points every time they're in front of a camera. Undocumented immigrants are all criminals and rapists and murderers. Elections are stolen. Healthcare, a universal health care program would get tacked on to what we currently pay, not replace it. And that any social safety nets turns us into a socialist country. Is there a plan by Democrats in Washington to come up with our own unified communication plan, because we have the truth on our side, that universal health care replaces the costs we're paying now, that we have millions of undocumented immigrants because we hired millions of undocumented immigrants over 50 years. We collect taxes from them, and that elections are safe and monitored. And climate change is real and told us by scientists, people just like us. They're not criminals, they're not liars. Is there a plan to unify and be tough and blunt with our communication?
So there's a lot of plans out there. There's a lot of very smart people working on this, but I would not look to Washington for solutions on this. And the reason I say that is, I think the answer to that, when you have a gap between what's clearly true and what people are being led to believe, the best way to cut through that is to get as close as possible to home. A lot of people don't trust, and it's tragic, a lot of people don't trust the Centers for Disease Control or the National Institutes of Health, but they trust their own doctor. A lot of people believe these horrifying things about immigrants, but they would stand up and defend ones that they actually know in their actual real lives. A lot of people, and you and I know people in our communities and families who might co-sign some pretty ugly stuff that's being said online about people who are different or vulnerable, but would stand, if there was someone in their own family, would stand up for them with everything they got. So I think we need to appeal to that. It's not going to be enough to just make everybody look at the spreadsheet showing that we were right all along. Believe me, I'm the kind of guy who wishes I could do that sometimes. But this is about so much more. This is about folks who are seeing the failures, there really are failures, that have been frankly served up at various times at moments when both parties have been in charge, and getting an easier answer. And basically the answer is like, let's just burn the house down and see what happens. A lot of people who voted for the current leadership, not because they even like them, but because they were willing to try anything that might make their lives better. And so we are not just speaking to people's heads, we're speaking to their hearts. But I have to believe, I feel it in this room, I feel it in so many places that I go, I feel it in our community in northern Michigan where we live right now, basically which way's east. 200, 300 miles exactly east of here. That people are ready to be called into something that's a common project, that's shared. I think we can have a better relationship to reality when we have a better relationship to each other, maybe more than the other way around. So look, in terms of bluntly communicating the facts, that's what I'm going to do all the time. It's why I'm going on podcasts that are pretty Trumpy. It's why Fox doesn't seem to be inviting me as often, but it's why I'll go when I can. But I'll tell you, for every time somebody like me goes on television to do this, it's 10 times more powerful when somebody here is willing, with all the love that you can muster, to talk to somebody you know and care about this, because that's much more likely to break through. Open the rafters there. Black shirt.
Thank you. My name is Irma, and my question is, all this stuff that's being talked about, and you've said several times, the president isn't going to be here forever. I mean, granted, eventually he will die, but I look at it and I think the Supreme Court is the one that gave him immunity, and look what he's doing. He doesn't feel like there's anything that can stop him, and it looks like he's right. He says maybe there won't be a midterm, and everyone goes, oh, no, there will be. But maybe there won't. How can someone I look at it and I think, how do you hold anyone accountable when you've just given them carte blanche?
Yeah.
Including the Supreme Court.
Right.
They should go.
So, yeah, look, the Supreme Court, and let's be clear, we do not wish ill or bodily harm on anybody, just to make that very clear. The Supreme Court has said that even if the president commits a crime, he is not to be held accountable for it. That's one of many things that the Supreme Court has said that is not only out of step with what most Americans believe, but is out of step with all kinds of case law and jurisprudence. But these people have their jobs for life because we have a system where there's no accountability for them either. Now, they're not supposed to be accountable in the day-to-day pressures of politics, but that doesn't mean that it makes sense to set ourselves up for what we have now, where a Supreme Court justice will actually time their departure from the bench. Sometimes it feels like they're timing their departure from the earth based on what party's going to be in charge. It's unhealthy, it doesn't make any sense, and it's led us to this strange reality that we're in. So I think it's not so radical to suggest a different makeup of the Supreme Court. By the way, you know what article of the Constitution says that there are 9 Supreme Court justices? Trick question, it's not in there. Congress decided that. You wouldn't even have to change the Constitution. And I'm not saying we just keep adding people who agree with us. I'm saying let's restructure it so we either have term limits so you're not in that job until you're dead, or a balanced bench that gets you more independent thinkers on that body. But we have to be willing to talk about those structural reforms. But let me say one other thing about this president making noises about doing away with democracy. And look, if there's anything we've learned, it's when he says something. The crazier it is, the more it's worth taking both seriously and literally, right? But he can only do that if some amount of the American people are on board. This is another thing that sometimes we need to remind ourselves and others of. The country is not on board with this. I know more people are on board with this than we would like, but that number is getting smaller every day. This is a very unpopular presidency. Now, that is not enough to absolve the opposition of coming up with real answers besides get rid of this guy. But it means that the more we hold to that, the harder it is to pull off any of the kind of funny business. And if you talk to people from countries that lost their democracy, which has happened in many countries, they will often say, we wish we had done more during the window that you all are in right now, you all meaning you Americans, to make sure that a president couldn't consolidate that position, eventually try to take over the media and those other institutions, so that it was really hard for people to think for themselves, and then the people really were on board with this. Remember, the people of Russia are not chafing under the rule of Vladimir Putin, waiting to overthrow him. They're on board. But there was a time when people were taking to the streets, and a lot of people from that generation of dissidents say, we wish we had been out there a little more. That's why things that seem so old-fashioned, like calling your congressman, or showing up at a No Kings event, or coming to a town hall, matter. Because when it's offline in 3D, it has a different kind of power. And I believe that is our true backstop. Not this Congress and not these courts, but the people are our true backstop against those kinds of abuses. So,
hi, my name is Eric. I'm from Eau Claire. I'm a Navy veteran.
Thank you.
Thank you. And served 30 years as a police officer in Eau Claire.
Thank you.
And 12 years a recovering Republican.
Welcome.
So you've had some wonderful, great policy statements tonight. And my question touches on a lot of other questions that have come up here today. But as someone who's served and committed their lives to what I believe America is, I'm deeply, deeply offended by the lawlessness of this administration, the leadership that's in charge of what ICE is doing right now, the Department of Homeland Security, and now even the FBI, an institution that I've had the greatest respect for as in 30 years as a police officer. How can we be assured that there will be justice for what's happening right now? Not vengeance, but we're a country of laws, and we won't be if we don't enforce them. It's not enough to just say, well, we need to move forward and not look back. Right. We need to look back. We have to rectify what's going on right now.
Yeah. First of all, again, I want to thank you for serving in uniform your country and your community, and honor that service, and also your readiness to declare your independence from one political party and reconsider. I'm really worried about that too. We have to be a nation of laws, and clearly we've got folks who have no regard for the law, the spirit, or in some cases the letter of the law. And I do wonder if it was a mistake earlier to try, for very good reasons, which was a desire to bring people together, to try to just blow past everything we had seen all the way through January of 2021 and just kind of put that in a box, put it behind us, and move on. I understand the reasons. At the time, I believed in those reasons. But it is very clear that there will need to be a level of transparency. That, like you said, it's not about revenge. It's about, frankly, giving the space to understand what happened and why, and above all, creating an environment where people who were part of this, who knew that it was wrong, get a chance to say why they did something that they knew was wrong, so that we can all understand what happened there, and so that they can help move on too. This has happened in places that have gone through abusive governments or those kinds of problems, and I think we're going to need to do it. It's going to be hard to figure out how to do it and have it be fair, but we have to have accountability, and it starts with transparency. Just imagine what we can get from transparency alone, because they've shut the books on a lot of what's going on. Government ethics today, watchdogs today, are not what they were just a year or two ago. And if we don't do that, there will be this, I think, this infected wound in the fabric of our system of law and order. And when we have that, it'll corrode the trust that we need in order to live. It'll corrode the trust that we need in order for law enforcement to function properly, the whole federal government to function properly. We can't let this happen again. But the first step is to get out of this mess that we're in right now. And that's where what I see and feel in this room gives me a great deal of hope. Sir.
Hi, Pete. I'm Rory from Norwalk, Iowa. We drove 4.5 hours to come up to see you.
Thanks for hitting the road.
I don't know if you recognize me.
Yes.
You came to a rally in Indianola with Mr. Costner, and we got a chance to
Yes.
speak, and you saw my dad's Navy hat, and you asked if I was in the Navy. And I said, no, my father was, and I talked about my family's history all the way back to the Revolutionary War. And then I said I had a brother that served in the Navy and my sister that served in the Corps.
Good to see you.
And I said, even though she served in the Corps, we still speak to her. But what I want to speak to you about, tonight with me I have 5 folks that worked on your campaign in Iowa, a very successful campaign. Bob and I worked in our precinct, and they said we would never carry our town, Norwalk. It's 15,000 people, and we absolutely destroyed it. It was all Pete. My question to you is, and this bothers me to this day, we know that you could have won that presidential election. Why is the DNC sticking their big fat noses into our business? Mr. Biden went down to South Carolina, made a sweetheart deal with the representative down there, and that swung the election his way. And I talked to a gentleman with the Iowa Farmers Union, and he told me the same thing happened with Bernie Sanders. When Hillary went into the DNC, poured in a bunch of money in her people, and that pushed Bernie out of that election. This kind of nonsense needs to stop. Candidates all need to be on the same footing and have the same chance to win. And we thought we had it won for you in Iowa. Thanks, Pete.
Thanks.
Oh, and also, Fernando Mello says hi.
Well, bring them my greetings. And it's lovely to see you. And thanks for being here now, and thanks for what you did to have my back then, when not a lot of people thought we had much of a shot. People didn't think we could win Iowa. You know we won Iowa, right? Just okay. Had we found out that we won Iowa the day of the caucuses instead of a few weeks later, I wonder how history might have been a little different. I think everybody learned from that. I think we've also, just as a country, learned a lot about trust. I care a lot about how we build. I wrote a whole book about it. Well, thank you. I spoke recently with Amy Klobuchar, who likes to tease me that, because, you know, and we work closely together on a lot of, especially on the transportation stuff. And she and I didn't know, this is after we were, any sparring that we might have done on the campaign was pretty well publicized. And neither one of us knew that the other one was working on a book, and mine came out and it was called Trust, and hers came out and it was called Antitrust. Very, very good book, by the way. But we need to make sure that our processes reflect our values. And that includes the processes that go into deciding who gets to represent political parties, from the highest office of the land all the way much closer to home. And I think that we need to open the lid on lots of different possibilities for reform. I just did a Zoom event for Mary Peltola, who's running for office up in Alaska. Great candidate, by the way. Things in, let's say, just say Alaska is one of the places where remarkable outcomes have happened because they're willing to do ranked choice voting. Open primaries, there are a whole number of reforms, is what I'm saying, that could build the confidence people have that the outcomes of elections reflect what they actually intend. And I believe at a moment like this, when our institutions are so out of whack, we shouldn't think of it as radical to try to reform some of the very machinery that we use to choose our leaders. Thanks.
This will be last question.
Oh.
Last question.
No pressure.
Hi, my name's Alex James. I'm from Winona, just over the river. I'm looking to get a job in politics. You have talked about the need for younger leaders to step up to the role. What are some important skill sets and mindsets for younger leaders to be effective given the current polarization?
Great question. Skill sets and mindsets. I love the way you put that. First of all, thanks for caring to be involved and being ready to engage. Some of the most important skill sets and mindsets, I would argue, are especially native to our part of the country, like humility. And it's tricky because you come into politics because you have passion about a way of doing things and a direction for our country that you believe in, or your community that you believe in. And it's important to be ready to stick to your guns and stick to your values, and also recognize that when you go out and talk to other people about what's going on in their lives and try to persuade, you're going to learn a thing or two as well. And you are going to probably adjust the way the world looks to you based on the experiences you have. And there's nothing like political organizing or volunteering or action for expanding your own sense of how the world works. Because when you are a representative of any kind of movement, be it a campaign or an issue advocacy, or when you become a representative of any kind of government by getting a role, people will throw whatever it is on their mind at you and then challenge you to respond. So the best thing is you grow through that. You extend yourself to other people through that. It's one of my favorite things about being involved in public life and in politics. But it also means you got to be ready to do a lot of listening, a lot of quantity time, which is part of what this is all about. And it means that you got to try to find why people look at the world the way they do. It's not about you. That's the most important thing about anything public service politics. It's not about you. But you get to grow in a whole new way because you're involved. And I guess the other thing that's really important is to carry a sense of hope. And I can feel how beaten down a lot of folks are by what is happening in this country that a lot of us barely even recognize. I can feel how much it feels like we're just being punched in the face by current events again and again. And that, of course, puts a lot of pressure on our capacity for hope. I get that it sounds a little retro to even talk about hope in the context of a gathering related to politics at a time like this. But the smartest thing I ever heard about hope is that hope is the consequence of action more than its cause. The consequence of action. And so I think it's important to have the skill set and the mindset to do something about what's around you. Do something concrete that'll make a difference. And recognize that from the impact that that has and the people you can maybe draw to be involved at your side comes more hope. You don't wait around for the hope to come so you can take action. You take action so you can generate the hope that we need to drive more action. And if you can fill your tanks with that, you'll be unstoppable. All right, I got a very convincing plea for one more. But all right, let's see it. The mic runners probably went back to do something else. Just project.
Here you go.
All right.
Thanks. My kids had a hard summer and got hurt by a friend. And the world, like what's on the ground is sad and hard, and what's up there is sad and hard. And time collided and said, this is what I'm going to do to show my children what we do with the problem. This is how we get involved. So I've had some people in town say, but you're not from here, and Mayor, that's a real big step. And I'm thinking, I don't know, I grew up dairy farm and construction company that had to compete by busting unions. I had all the woes of everybody that I live with that I'm wanting to represent and showing up to represent. And what I see as common in the people I'm listening to and the people that I'm watching, we lived in Minneapolis when George Floyd was murdered, so to the woman who's up here, I'm so sorry and thank you for coming. When I think, we have twins also. You know the dynamics.
It's really something.
Yeah, and it is. And it's like you get really good at helping make amends. You get really good as a parent at seeing like step one to coming together is the I'm sorry. and it takes so much bravery. But I know this is going to sound weird because I've always voted Democratic, but I really think that we can start that. We can show up and say, I'm sorry to the neighbors right here, right? But also to, like, I have VFW representatives that I'm talking to who are saying, we got forgotten and our commander's turning 90 next week and they don't have anybody to take over the post and we're going to lose our VFW. All the way from that to I'm at transmission line meetings listening and thinking, are the people who are getting this power knowing that my friend over here is losing her house because this is coming through whether she likes it or not? We have to say sorry. And who's going to go first? And you're a twin dad. What do you think?
Wow. Yeah, that's part of growth, right? Like, we didn't get everything right. I'm so proud of the stuff that we were able to do. But, you know, I look back at things that certainly during the time that I had the privilege of being involved in Washington, we didn't get right. I mean, we wouldn't be here if, or maybe we wouldn't be here, if leaders from both parties hadn't figured out a long time ago how to stop inequality in our economy from reaching these absurd proportions. I think more recently, if we had muscled through serious immigration reform versus thinking that we could just contain the status quo just a little bit longer, we might not be in this brutal situation that we're in right now. And I think all of us have, well, I certainly am guilty of having been susceptible to what the algorithm does to our minds and forgetting that all of this politics, democracy is a process of encounter. And nobody comes in with all the right answers. Nobody leaves with all the right answers. And that we can all do better. But again, I am convinced that we have that capacity, that we have that in our communities, that we have that in our country. I know it feels bleak right now. These times are more precedented than you would think. It was only 2 human lifetimes ago, end to end, that half of this country broke off and declared war against the other half for the purpose of being able to continue enslaving people. And we got through that. We will get through this because it doesn't have to be this way. And I can feel that. I know you want to be part of that. I'm proud to be with you. I hope to continue the conversation, and I cannot thank you enough for spending some time with us tonight. Thanks very much. Thank you.